You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to V.A.C's Roundtable. We are up to number 86, and we have a special one today. We're very happy to have Mr. Brian Applegarth. He is a leader in cannabis tourism, and this is one that we usually don't see often. Let's see. Because it's a rather new situation, cannabis tourism, because as we've seen in the last few years, that cannabis has become popular all over the United States, but of course all over the world, as we've seen, changes happen around the world. So of course, where people go, they want to know what's happening, and of course we're very spoiled here in California too. I was in and around Oaksterdam. Loading permissions. You have permissions. All right, should be good to go. All right. So basically, we're going to get into a full talk on cannabis tourism, which is basically looking at how people are going to be not necessarily traveling with cannabis, but traveling to cannabis destinations, which is something a lot of us are finding happening a lot more and more. We find ourselves in places. Years ago, I found myself in Vancouver when that cannabis scene was happening, and found myself at a coffee shop and with other like-minded people. And of course, my question was, well, what's going on? What's happening? So what we've ended up, having a little bit of technical difficulty with this. 1 second. For some reason, the Facebook is giving me a little bit of challenge for some reason. If not, I will give this one last try. We're just going to continue, and then we're just going to put it up on. Da-da-da-da. Oh, no, we're going. All right. So, with that in mind, we're going to jump right into things with Brian Applegarth and basically get into the question, which is specifically to you. It's not necessarily on cannabis tourism, but why cannabis? How did you originally come to cannabis? When did you originally hear about cannabis? And when did you realize that this was going to become part of your life's work?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for inviting me in. It's great to be here, and appreciate the work and that you do and with this group. Yeah, I mean, I first became aware of cannabis and consumed cannabis my last year of junior high, kind of freshman year of high school, right in there, and it was by way of a older sister's boyfriend, basically, and his buddies. So that was kind of my first time consuming cannabis, and it had a role in high school, but it wasn't as deep in my life and as my daily routines or my consuming habits. And then I had some great experiences traveling. I did a lot of traveling in my 20s and 30s, and cannabis. I have these memories in different places around the world where cannabis was present, Amsterdam and several other places. And so that was another kind of step in that direction. Also in college, I used it quite a bit more, consumed it a lot, much more. And, never really thought of it as a career path. But when I came back to California in 2013, I had been kind of gone or living in different places for the last 10 years, 11 years, 12 years. And when I came back, California was full of dispensaries. That market was thriving. And I got my medical card and started exploring all the shops and just discovering the cannabis culture as well as the retail scene and the different products and brands in the market. I don't even know how many shops I visited, but I visited a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if it was well over like hundreds of shops that I visited in that time. And it became very clear to me that this wasn't going to turn around. It was going to keep evolving. And for me, I was at a time in my life where I was looking at kind of what does the next phase of life look like when it comes to career. And there was three things that I felt like I was qualified to really carve a career out in. And one of those was travel. And I knew I didn't have the stigma. I had the curiosity around cannabis. I really loved, the more that I learned about it, I really loved the human rights element. I got really geeky about the history and the cultural heritage of cannabis. And cannabis tourism is where I planted my flag. So I actually enrolled in Oaksterdam. That was the first thing I did when I jumped out of this corporate job. And I enrolled in Oaksterdam. I was living in Oakland at the time. And that was my first step. And immediately when I took that step, I knew I was taking a step in the direction of cannabis tourism. And I didn't really know where it would lead me exactly. But that's kind of how I relate to it. There was also really significant people in that journey. Pebbles Trippett and Dennis Perrone are two of them that I spent a good amount of time with, as well as John Entwistle. You know, the compassion and the life and the advocacy that those kind of pioneers lived was really inspiring in a lot of ways. So yeah, and here I am today, and it's come a long way since 2013, to say the least.
Yes, and we continue to make that possible as we'll be working next month at the UN to get more on the international. So we're very proud of what's happening and glad to see that this is continuing to grow. So it is something that more cities, counties, and municipalities are starting to realize as they've seen the laws change, that they've seen, people come through. We saw Colorado get a large swing in 2012 when they initially, passed it, and it was, straight curiosity from people, because now there were places to actually travel to where they didn't have to feel restricted, or their liberties weren't as squashed, shall we say. Next up will be Council Member Tony Landry with our next question. Council Member.
Hi, welcome, Brian. It's exciting hearing about the cannabis tourism. Louisiana has a lot of potential for that. When people visit the state, to have a place to go, to consume cannabis, a safe place. My question is, how do you address the misconception that cannabis tourism is drug tourism, given that only a portion of tourists consume cannabis? At the same time, many engage in cannabis-related experiences for education, wellness, and culture exploration.
Yeah. Well, there's three kind of pillars as far as my experience in the last stretch, doing this for 10 plus years. And I really ground the conversation in what I call fact-based education, data, and case studies. And I feel like those three different tools seem to always ground the conversation in reality, and each play an important part. For example, fact-based education, being able to tell stories about how cannabis and hemp have been part of the coevolution with human beings, and the different ways that cannabis and hemp have been applied in cultures throughout the world. It's really important information because it puts everything within context. So I typically educate using fact-based education, right? So whether it's cannabis being part of the U.S. medical pharmacopoeia, the story about cannabis being accessible as medicine on the pharmacy shelves back in the early 1900s, or the fact that there's a medical patent filed on cannabis right now that was filed in 2003. These kind of fact-based points are really important when it comes to education and people understanding how our bodies work with the plant and the cannabinoids and the therapeutic compounds, and why that is because of coevolution. So really framing it in a factual way is really important. Things that you can point to. And then for me, the data that really was a significant moment in my career was co-authoring the first study on the cannabis motivated travel audience in the United States, specifically the active leisure travel audience. So these are people that choose what destinations to visit based on access to cannabis experiences. And that is a specific experience product that entices visitation, which results in economic impact. Because when visitors come to a destination, they stay in hotels and they spend money in a very different way than residents. So it's a different kind of conversation because it's not a cannabis consumer conversation, it's a cannabis traveler conversation. So learning how to do that, I'm very grateful to the travel and tourism industry for, bringing me in to teach me really and to co-author that survey and then analyze the data and provide insights with consideration to evolving policy and trends, which we know is very rapid in the cannabis and the hemp industry. So it's always a very lively conversation of where are we at today, what is the policy landscape, what are the emerging trends, and why. It's also helpful that hemp is one of the most powerful renewable resources on Earth. And it's important to understand hotel development, replacing plastics, sustainability and regeneration are priorities for the global travel industry. So being able to educate people on the way that hemp can elevate the conversation as a really powerful tool is another really important point. So I think that helps us get away from this drug misnomer because it's very stunted. It's a very stunted way to look at the capabilities of the plant. And I mean, down to the hemp seed, right? So like whole plant medicine, power greens, the nutrition of a hemp seed. Whenever I feel like it's necessary to educate, I feel like it's necessary to really educate about the plant in the ground and all the different ways that it can uplift, whether it's community vitality or whether it's sustainability strategies. And that tends to debunk a lot of that. Once people understand all that information and they see it based in fact, and in data. The third one, again, is case studies. So in my instance, I'll point to other destinations or attractions or hotels or airports, like people that are part of the global tourism economy, which accounts for 10.2% of the global GDP. I'll provide case studies of real cases where people are leveraging and integrating cannabis and hemp strategies, which just helps debunk all the misconceptions and the fear, and people see it in application. So even if they didn't want to be the first, they might be willing to be the second or the fifth or the 100th. You know what I mean? So that's how I typically approach and try to ground the conversation in reality.
Councilmember Crowitz has a follow-up.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I just wanted to drill down a little bit deeper into that. I was just thinking about Amsterdam, back in the days when I worked there in the early, late 90s, I guess. And there was seemingly like two different kinds of traveler, if you will. The tourism, sort of sector that you're describing, I think, were some of the people that I hung out with that came to Amsterdam. They came to Amsterdam maybe primarily because they could access cannabis and access cannabis experience, but they also went to the museums and they ate at the restaurants and they stayed at the hotel and they were, law-abiding in that sense. And then at the same time, there was these horrible situations to which the government reacted quite harshly and still has, to this day, issues with local people from other neighboring countries like France driving over to the Netherlands, filling up their suitcase with cannabis and going back home. And I guess first, do you actively discourage that kind of, drug tourism? Do you actually discourage it? I guess what I'm kind of looking for is how would you talk to countries like the Netherlands or a country like that about what you're doing to put them at ease that somehow what we're doing with legitimate cannabis tourism will mitigate even or reduce the, what I mean? Is that part of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, at the global level, one of the big milestones in my career was founding the Cannabis Travel Association International, which is the united voice of cannabis and hemp tourism was the vision from day one. And I believe, that the facts show that cannabis and hemp are a travel trend that is 100% grounded in well-being and wellness. And it spans into medical travel and it spans into leisure travel. So providing people with the context of why that is and proving that with the data and the education and the case studies. And then every year I put forward a lexicon, a global lexicon of these are the words that we use to talk about this. So we can frame the conversation in the right way. So I really am focused on the present and maybe the guiding and being a steward of the future, because to get back to what this should be, it is a conversation around wellness with a big asterisk by the concept of well-being. I think this is where cannabis tourism really differentiates from many other travel trends, because it has this entheogenic capability as well as all the other therapeutic cannabinoids, right? It's a medicine plant at the end of the day. But that entheogenic part that allows for awareness and perspective and contemplation and self-discovery and inspiration and all these really significant capabilities if we use it with intention. Also, the entire conversation around mindset and setting. And what does that mean in relationship to cultivars and appellations and sun-grown versus indoor, or not even versus, and indoor and greenhouse. And, when it comes to Amsterdam, I look at every destination very distinctly. And each destination has its own brand and has its own history and has its own culture. With Amsterdam, I think I would, there's some data from Amsterdam that shows that this was back in I want to say the 1990s, they grabbed this data. So it's a lot dated, but it showed that one in four tourists to Amsterdam went to a cannabis shop, 25%. 1 in 10 cited cannabis as the destination driver, which is the primary reason they traveled. So you're seeing 10% of travelers that were traveling to Amsterdam just because cannabis existed there and they can do that. I think Amsterdam, by not really creating a proper, fully baked legal market, it leaned into this quasi-legal gray model where they really missed the boat on the wellness side and the well-being side. And that's because there's a lack of attention and a lack of energy and investment in that opportunity. And that also comes down to hempcrete, right? I'm not just talking about, so I would, as I know there's some really great progress being done in the Netherlands right now with building out a more real supply chain. And as they do this, to reimagine the cannabis and hemp travel trend in a more accurate way would, it would be worthwhile, because, dealing in reality is good. And it's a very different, it's a different landscape now than it was. And it's moving, it's going to always include the smoking and inhalation, but that's a big barrier in travel. A lot of these destinations, that's one of the top 3 things that I have to overcome, is this notion that everyone smokes. And there's other options today, like low-dose beverages and topicals and spa and teas and tinctures and all these other things. So yeah, as I educate globally, I really keep it in the vertical of the wellness and well-being conversation. I explain that medical travel is part of it, leisure travel is part of it, so are events. And when I say events, it's not necessarily consumer events, it's business events, it's industry events, it's doctors that are flying into countries to get training and to get credits on understanding what the endocannabinoid system is. They might be flying in with their golf clubs and their spouse, and this is a doctor training seminar. So we have to think about travel in a much broader context with the industry level, at the B2B level, the B2C level. And that B2C level isn't always consumers. Oftentimes it's visitors or the travel economy, which, just a bit of context real quick, I've been measuring this audience for about 5 years now, a little over 5 years, 6 years. and it's about an audience of about 70 to 72 million Americans in the United States make their travel decisions based on the ability to access cannabis as part of their itinerary, as part of their vacation. Of this 70 to 72 million travel audience, 24% of them do not self-identify as cannabis consumers, but they would love to have a cannabis experience while on vacation. It's very similar to somebody who would go to a coffee farm in Kona in Hawaii, but may not drink caffeine or coffee, right? So it's basically people that love life experiences and learning something new, and they're curious about it. So, that's kind of where I exist. And I would love to, I'm here and I'm excited about this next arc because there's a lot of opportunity in Europe, and there's a lot of great history in Europe, and it's one of the biggest market, arguably, globally. And there's countries that need to be looking at this in a much more informed way. And that's kind of the role that I've taken in this whole story, is I help bring the information to stakeholders and partners, and help give them information to have an informed conversation and understand all the opportunities, so they can make better strategies for the destination.
As well as the market also needs to provide products for those that want to also experiment, which I know early on was a challenge because the potencies were an issue, and I know people, they go in expecting beer and they end up with literally shots of whiskey. You know what I'm saying? So that's a challenge in and of itself for those places that are in those destinations, so that people don't over-medicate or find themselves in that uncomfortable situation. But, finding products like the, 1, 3, and 5 milligram drink seems to be a easier and more safer stepping in point for most people, as opposed to 100 milligram edible, which, as we know, is made for the more experienced, but people don't understand necessarily what they're experiencing. And that's also different, which we saw in Amsterdam, right? We saw cannabis allowed, but then we also saw smoking was permitted, but then we saw edibles were permitted, but then we saw people also push that limit with edibles to the point where the Dutch had to actually regulate those edibles because people were doing some unfortunate, things. So this has been an ongoing problem that I'm glad to see that the market and the consistency of having these 10th Amendment realities have spawned, product and product development that is easier for the uninitiated or those that are not as experienced with cannabis, able to dip their toe in with more confidence than in the past. So I just wanted to state that for the record. Next up will be Mary Lynn Mathry with our next question. Councilmember Mathry.
Okay, nice to meet you, Brian. I'm glad what you're doing. Education is a key, and just getting around helping these folks kind of see the real thing, as opposed to the reefer madness bullshit. I run Patients at a Time, which is like the longest running accredited conference series. So, by the way, if you got a group of docs, you want to bring them to Charlottesville in September, be glad to have you. My question is, and you touched a little bit on it in the beginning of your last answer, but what are the financial benefits or incentives for municipalities to actively participate in cannabis tourism?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And thank you for your work. Patients at a Time is a really important story in the story of the cannabis movement. So yeah, what's the economic opportunity? Again, there is a ready, willing, and able audience called the cannabis travel audience. The one that I've been studied mostly is the active leisure travel audience. So these are leisure travelers. There's also medical travelers, which need to be measured and profiled. I do a lot of profiling on the wellness segment. So when I architected this survey out with Peter Yesowich and MMGY Travel Intelligence, there's really three different segments. You have the canna curious traveler, the canna wellness traveler, and the cannabis connoisseur. So we have three different segments that are profiled in depth. And they have different motivating factors for each one, different age ranges. So it's all audience driven. But instead of a consumer audience, yet again, it's an audience that's driven by experience access through the platform of tourism and travel. So the cannabis motivated travel audience, when they are in a destination, well, let's start with the annual spend. Typically, this audience, which is 70 million in the United States alone, they spend about $3,600 to $3,800 a year on travel and tourism, right? So that's the kind of the pot you're targeting if you're a business and a brand. This is a very good, important data point for advocacy. For every dollar spent in a cannabis shop, approximately an additional $2.80 is injected into the local economy through arts and culture, culinary, etc. So again, that's that visitor spend, that multiplier, which economic development departments find very interesting, right? Because that is a different type of economic impact than a resident. A resident also, for example, might be looking more at what is the low price leader, whereas a visitor with I call it a wow and roam attitude, when you're visiting a place, you might pay a premium for a flower that's grown down the street and is rolled in a hemp blunt or something, like there's people justify spends very differently when they're on vacation. So the economic impact is, what is it worth to your destination? And so every destination needs to look at their brand and their community and their history and say, what is cannabis and hemp to us? And what are our differentiators? And what could we offer as an experience for visitors? And, they should be asking themselves, how are we enabling our community to thrive and be vital through this opportunity with cannabis and hemp emerging in the experience economy or the visitor economy, right? So, if destinations like Mendocino County, Humboldt County, Oakland, San Francisco, right now, West Hollywood has an amazing product with their lounges, so you have to look at what is your experience product? How are you integrating it into your destination brand? How are you stewarding your community from every level? And how are you marketing this essentially? And a lot of the marketing strategies right now, some of the most powerful ones that I've seen are the earned media kind of PR stories, because there's so much curiosity globally around this new cannabis experience economy that is taking the Amsterdam coffee shop model and it's just going boom into a whole different experience suite. So how effectively a destination can look at cannabis as a differentiator as part of their brand and then incorporate it into their destination strategy for economic development and economic vitality, that's the opportunity on the table. But it's a significant amount of revenue. It's just, it's those destinations that are willing to invest in it. And there needs to be vulnerability with that, because a lot of them don't understand it. And they're terrified of smoking. They're terrified of what being high means. And, and they just have general, to your point, reefer madness stigma that's lingering. So those are the three detractors that I'm always addressing: is stigma, smoking, and the altered state, and trying to make it not scary, and also just give them the facts so they understand what the facts are.
That's key. All right, next up will Council Member Leslie Freeze. Leslie.
Thanks, Etienne. Brian, it's good to see you. I am such a fan of your work. It's so important for our industry at large and so many different factors. My question is, what are some key insights from your national study on the cannabis travel audience, and how do they influence marketing strategies for cannabis tourism?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the most important insights is that this is a travel trend. When you look at the data across the board, it definitely anchors itself in wellness and well-being. And that is the place that this exists. And we all know, a lot of people in this room know why, and communicating why is really important. One of the most important data points that we continue to gather information on with this annual study we do is the cannabis travel audience is very much becoming more sophisticated with understanding the importance of pairing cannabis with an arts and culture experience, with a Michelin star or a local foodie experience, with a walk in the redwoods or a walk on the coast, or it could be a just like a city walking tour. But they're starting to understand the importance of pairing cannabis with activity, and that we are at a new frontier where cannabis can be an enhancement tool when used mindfully and in an informed way. It can enhance a travel experience and make it more robust and more meaningful, perhaps. And that could be as simple as bringing you into the present moment, which is something that cannabis that has THC in it in some way, whether it's minimal or a lot, depending on if you're taking one puff or if you're smoking a whole joint. If you dose with caution and you do it in a mindful way, it has that capability of bringing you to the present moment. But then what is that terpene profile layer? And what does that mean as far as how the effects could inform how you feel and how you relate to your setting that you're walking into or your activity? So all of a sudden, cannabis becomes this enhancement tool for a travel itinerary. And what does that mean? If you're gonna, go have a cannabis beverage before going and catching the opera, and what kind of and how that will enhance that experience. So those are a few of the data points that I find really interesting and important, is the grounding in wellness and the appetite for pairing cannabis. I refer to this as effect pairing. So, as food pairs with wine, cannabis pairs with activities and experiences. And I have a whole method with a deck and a chart that maps out kind of what this looks like in travel. And I use that as a teaching tool in travel. The other two things I'll mention as far as data is this audience has a strong appetite for a curated experience. So that could be a flight of pre-rolls, beverage tastings, but they want to have something that's curated with information and takes them on a journey. So it needs to be a curated experience flight, right? And this is understandable because in a travel and tourism, cannabis and hemp are not part of being a commodity. They're not even a product being sold. They're not even a service, where services are all about time saved, like a haircut or oil change. In travel and the experience economy, it's about time well spent, where people want to spend 60 to 90 minutes with a curated, informational, teach me something, provoke thought. And this is the experience economy, which is really a different type of economic model than products, services, and commodities. So that curated tasting flight is really interesting. The other thing we continually see is the interest in going to a farm, visiting the place of source, the communities that have multi-generational knowledge that have been working with this plant as cultivators, but also as alchemists. All these people that have been using this medicine and understanding this medicine for generations. So those are all parts of kind of the interest of this audience. And it'll be fun to watch how it continues to evolve.
Councilmember Green, you had a follow-up, sir.
I do. Got to get the microphone out. I find this all fascinating. This is like brilliant. This is like taking a trip. So thank you. Thank you for the journey. In passing, you've talked about mindfulness, about awareness, things that motivate people, what they're seeking. I'm just curious in your own data or what you've come across. I'm a yoga instructor. I'm curious what you found out about perhaps cannabis and yoga experiences. Is there anything that's popped up on your radar? I know that there's people that teach ganja yoga, cannabis yoga. There's various studios. I'm just curious if that's something that you're tracking yet, or if that's appeared on your radar.
Yeah, I would look in deeper to this, but from the research I've done, there are some cases made out there from historians and experts that cannabis was used as a tool for meditation with, I believe it was Buddhism and some other religions where it was typically a 1-to-1 and it was in tincture form. And it was used as a way to enhance connection with the divine. And really, that's what entheogenic medicine is, right? And you have to know what audience you're speaking to start pulling out words like that. But this cannabis being a tool to connect with the spirit world is a very real case study in history. So when you start that's where that well-being part comes in, Michael, where it's like, that's why I think well-being is really important, because for me, that connects to spiritual health and emotional health, which for me ties into yoga and meditation. And when you can point back to something like meditation with a religion in going back centuries, all of a sudden people start seeing, oh, wow, there's actually cases that talk about this and demonstrate this. And then I typically surround that education too with a kava ceremony in Fiji or a green tea ceremony in Japan, these sacred ceremonies that are agricultural products where, in Japan, they have ceremonial grade green tea. And why can't there be a ceremonial grade cannabis for entheogenic, connecting with the divine? And why can't we make space for that, even if we can't measure it perfectly? Because many people understand that energy is a thing, and that there is a divine source in some ways for knowledge. So I think about that kind of Buddhist case study. And I also think about what I was tapping on earlier, which I believe may be one of the most powerful parts of the entheogenic element of cannabis is that capability to bring you into the present moment. And that is a teaching across religions of all kinds going throughout history. So as far as a through line, I love talking about terpene profiles and what's the cannabinoid profile, what's the dominant or co-dominant terpenes, and going through that. But when we talk about effects, I think the one effect for me that really is the through line through all of that is this concept of being brought into the present moment and in a place of where time and space dissolve, and you're completely immersed in the activity that you're present with, whether that's a conversation where all of a sudden that communication strengthens because that energetic connection is stronger because you're present, or whether that is you painting a picture or looking at a problem differently and getting more interpretation and understanding of how you could relate to it. So it helps you with how you relate to things. So I think all this ties back into, for me, yoga or meditation or these kind of well-being practices.
Excellent. Thank you.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420. Rerolled Saturdays. Check it out. Nothing but non-stop cannabis and psychedelic programming. Find it at 420pace.ca.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Are you looking to get your medical cannabis grow license? Limestone City Hydroponics can help patients through the process of obtaining their license to grow medical cannabis. What's that? You don't have a doctor? If you meet the medical criteria, Limestone City Hydroponics has a nurse practitioner who can assess and provide medical cannabis prescriptions. What are you waiting for? Contact Limestone City Hydroponics at limestonecityhydroponics.ca or call them at 613-548-0420.
Pace Radio, is the People Advocating Cannabis Education Radio Network.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Councilmember Michael Crowitz. Councilmember?
Thank you, Tim. I guess my role in my questions tonight is to get down to the brass tacks. But
Sure.
this question, especially the second half of it, I think is very important from our perspective as a non-governmental organization, right? So anyway, the question is, how can destinations prepare for cannabis-friendly tourism while balancing regulations, local concerns, economic opportunities? And again, the second part, what role do destination organizations and travel associations, et cetera, play in integrating cannabis tourism into the mainstream hospitality and travel world and experiences?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question. Wow, that's a great question. I mean, the first thing to do is get a baseline in a data-driven way, right? And the way that this typically expresses itself in the travel industry is something called a market readiness index. And in my instance, that's cannabis, right? So it's looking at the different conversations around two new industries that are becoming part of your community and where's our baseline right now and where are we indexing on different fronts, whether it's destination development, destination marketing, destination stewardship, brand management. You know, if we're licensing cannabis shops, for example, are we putting all of them in the industrial district with curtains on the windows where it's off the tourist track? Or are we putting something that is accessible with a hospitality-minded experience right in downtown near the hotels? Because you should be developing your destination in a mindful way and understanding how to do that. So allowing a destination to take a standardized index that can ground the conversation, and then from there you have to educate with again data, case studies, and fact-based education, right? And in this instance, you know, let's look at the destinations that are leading the world. Destinations like Amsterdam, like Oakland, like West Hollywood, right? San Francisco, Oakland. So Mendocino and Humboldt too, arguably, for rural regions. So when you start looking at the destinations that are implementing strategy, you know, showing that to all the other destinations around the world is really important. And one of those strategies, oftentimes, one of the first things I get brought in for is stakeholder education, where I am just talking to a group and giving data and facts and figures and case studies and answering questions. And that gets the ball rolling. Because everyone's like, wow, they walk away and go, this is different than I thought. And this is, you know, when you start talking about the nutrition of a hemp seed and hempcrete for hotels, it's not in the ballpark they're expecting. So you bring them all the knowledge of how this plant can be a vehicle for good for their community. And then you show it, demonstrate it with the case studies. So yeah, and that index is a big part of it. Also, all of this, Michael, ties back into, okay, you have all the information. Now, how do you get even more specific with your destination in mapping out kind of where are your key partners or products for the experience economy? So if you're XYZ destination, how many shops do you have? How many are on the tourist track? How many lounges? Which ones give a hospitality experience? Which ones have the most engaged staff that can kind of curate that? And also, what's the stakeholder sentiment from the elected officials to the economic development department? What is the sentiment at the rulemaker level? And do we need to continually touch in and educate? And the answer is yes. So a lot of times it's bringing that information to stakeholder education and partnership education, as well as partnership development. And typically when I go in and start getting to that phase of my work, I typically circle, depending on the size of the destination, it could be 3 to 10 like key partners that embody the cannabis experience, story, and brand of the destination? And then how do we get organized around a collective strategy so we could all start rowing in the same direction, where we can develop partnerships with hotels and airports and rental car companies and arts and culture attractions, and especially now in California, right? You can do ticket sales. So what does that look like to have partners that you can bundle together, you know, a lounge experience with a ticket to the San Francisco MoMA? And that is normalization to me. You start rolling products out like that, it starts integrating cannabis in the spirit of social inclusion in the experience economy. But it all starts with that indexing and getting people educated so you can have real conversations and start unpacking and developing at the pace that you're able to. And every destination is different with that too. Some destinations are like full go. Other ones have a very strong, let's just say, wine influence, where I know there's rooms that I'm not in where they're dealing with the wine growers and the vintner association, and they have a stronghold and they have a lot of influence. So I always approach my work as I am here to be a steward, and I want to be a source of trusted information, and I'm here to be an educator. And if you want me to provide recommended strategies, I love that, because I think that I have a knack for it. And I always try to look at it holistically, from hemp to cannabis, sustainability to journeying. I don't shy away from, you know, how amazing going on a high dose cannabis journey could be while on vacation as well, in the right setting, right? With the right intention. So there's room for all of it. And I think it's our job. I mean, all of us in this room have different conversations with different people. We all have a relationship with this plant. But I believe it's, at least in my role, it's my responsibility to always reflect the accuracy of the plant and to do its service. And it's a very evolved, flexible, very incredible species, right? So we have to continue to make space for all the different applications of kind of hemp and cannabis.
All right. Next up will be Council Member Michael Green.
I love the passion, and I got to admit, just now listening to you speak, somehow Leonard Cohen's "I'm Your Man" was floating through my head. You know, I love it. So apparently, one of the impacts of legalization in many places has been the development of like cannabis community centers, where maybe painting takes place, all kinds of activities, food drives, etc. And I'm assuming that's having an impact on the community at large, and as compared to the illicit or black market community. What is your take on that, in terms of how that comes back to support the community, reinforce the cannabis acceptance, reduce the stigma, etc.?
I hope that these new lounge owners and these people that are newer to the space are looking at the compassionate history of cannabis as a community healing space, because that is a reflection of, I think, the legacy mindset in a lot of ways. And it also is more accurate of what the highest expression is. You know, thinking about how many jars we can push as fast as possible is a bad North Star, in my opinion. So when it comes to the experience economy, these community gathering spaces is a really important sentiment to nurture and to create spaces that provide these services that care and are grounded in compassion and human connection and medicine and spiritual health. You know, I think that this wellness theme needs to be ever present, and it needs to be felt in some way in these lounges. Because this is a plant that deserves to have this reverence behind it when you're working with it. And I don't think the cannabis industry honestly does a very good job these days about reminding this wave of new operators that are like dollar signs in the eyes of welcoming them into the industry with a very clear cultural compass and value-based compass. So yeah, I mean, that's my hope. And the compassionate cannabis, you know, movement today, continuing to have a voice that is as present and as loud as the recreational, you know, quote unquote recreational side. I think is a really important effort that needs to happen. And preferably it's going to come alive in these community spaces. Also, because as you get sick and people need cannabis to heal, to be able to be around people, I remember Dennis communicating. I didn't get to experience those compassionate places like some people did back when they were really, important, really, not they weren't more important less, but then when they were really grounded in that space. So yeah, I think that these experiential places need to be accessible and grounded in wellness and well-being, and it needs to be factual, and it needs to offer experiences that make people come away with more knowledge and where they can then utilize the plant to uplift their quality of life, whether that's eating a hemp seed in the morning because of the nutrition, or whether that's smoking a joint every day with their coffee. I mean, that's up to them. But I think getting them the knowledge is really important.
Right on. Yeah, it's absolutely imperative. Next up will be Council Member Wade Laughter. Much love, Wade. You're up.
Thank you, Chen. And been a hot minute or two since we saw each other, Brian.
Yeah.
I really am really grateful that there are persons like yourself with such a fierce desire to see this plant and the community around this plant normalized in our culture across the planet. I just got to say, it's really a treat to know you and to see you continuing to do this work that I bet at times is relatively thankless. So I'm here as one to thank you, not only for the work you've done, but for showing up here today and putting up with our questions and our desire to learn more about what you're doing, because I think you're doing great work. So here's my question for you, Brian. How does cannabis tourism intersect with wellness and experiential travel? And what opportunities exist for businesses in those sectors to intersect with, if you will, with cannabis businesses, given all the regulations that cannabis businesses deal with in most jurisdictions? And again, thank you, Brian.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question, Wade. And just to say it as well, your pioneering work is outstanding. And part of the Cannabis Trail storytelling uplifts Lawrence Ringo, yourself, and Dr. Courtney, and the work you've done with the important cultivars in the CBD space. And Harlequin is one of my favorite strains, by the way. So thank you for all the work you've done, because you empower this conversation of wellness tourism. So
Monica.
Yeah, it means a lot getting asked that from you. So thank you.
Unmuted.
So how does it intersect? I think there's the wellness component, right? And when I say wellness, I think of wellness as biology and teaching people about the lock and key system, receptors, all the different ways you can take cannabis medicine, from cannabinoids to terpenes to flavonoids and beyond. Teaching people enough without overwhelming them, where they can understand the basic principles of this plant and application. But also, I find there's a lot of power in those cultural case studies that are grounded in wellness and well-being, including that spiritual side, that well-being side, right? So there's the biological side that I look at as the wellness side, that's a little more grounded in receptors and cannabinoids and blood-brain barriers and apoptosis and all those things. And then there's the well-being side, which I think is the really interesting space. I'm really driven by the well-being vertical, because I think that entheogenic capability has a lot of room to honestly just make humanity better and make people more aware and compassionate and empathetic and connected and interconnected. And all those things really are priorities in the work I do. So, and of course there's the medical side, right? But we're talking about wellness and experiential travel. I would like to see wellness and experiential well-being and wellness travel with cannabis and hemp be prioritized. And this could be at a business group meetings and conferences summit, where you have little CBD droppers that you could put in people's beverages if they want to have some, CBD, or you can give them a CBN maybe part of the welcome gift in the hotel rooms for this 1,000-person summit is a little CBN gummy to help people sleep the first night in a hotel room. I think those little touch points are really important in the wellness application or improved quality of life, whether it's a good night's sleep or whether it's, anti-inflammatory relaxation. So I think there's a lot of intersectionality in hotels, in events, obviously in the lounges where people go to a program to really learn. And maybe it's a 2-month long program where they go every Friday and they're learning about a new part of cannabis and hemp as applications for quality of life and well-being. I also love this idea of group retreats where people are coming to heal together in some way. And that word heal can be very expansive. I also like the idea of people coming together to vision and to think about the future and dream together and allow cannabis to help unlock and see different ways of being, where it unlocks new awareness. And then as long as we act with integrity with that new knowledge and we're effective, positive change can be made. So I think yet again, it all comes down at this juncture. There's so much education and knowledge to get out, but putting it wrapped in the brand of authentically wrapped in the brand of wellness and well-being, I believe is this next era, because that, it was medical. It kind of dipped way too far in rec, play, legal, money, more. Now we got to reground this thing and all the data too. Like, it's not just me saying, all the data shows that, especially with the travel audience. This is a wellness travel trend, 100%. And so how do we speak to that with a leisure, with a medical, and how does the cannabis industry start speaking to that at the global level? That is key. In the travel industry that I work with, Wade, every year there's a global lexicon that comes out in 4 languages. And there is coordination and communication that is healthy and vibrant and respectful. And I don't see that in the cannabis industry. And I think that it's needed now more than ever to get on the same page and to be, so I'm hoping that the cannabis industry is either doing that and I'm just not aware of it, or that we have that on the plan to start, grounding the conversation with shared lexicon, because that's where it begins. And that lexicon needs to be grounded in compassion, wellness, well-being. And whenever we get off course, let's go ahead and look at the plant, because a lot of the principles that the plant embodies, balance, all of these kind of principles and capabilities that the plant embodies and represents, usually there's a learning there. There's a blueprint there of how to be in the world. And so, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's all that intersectionality, I guess, from lexicon with wellness to hotels to conferences to lounges.
No, I think you did a great job of sort of wrapping up a complicated thing. And really what it's about is helping these wellness businesses understand the potential uptick in their business, in their customer experience, is I think what you're pointing to. And I really like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. Next up will be Councilmember Michael Davis. Councilmember Davis, you're recognized.
Yeah, hi, Brian. My question that I have for you is, what challenges do cannabis-friendly destinations face regarding policy, public perception, and industry collaboration, and how can they overcome them?
So cannabis-friendly destinations, it's those 3 detractors. So typically stigma, general reefer madness, people that smoke pot are horrible human, stigma, and then smoking, and then the altered state, because people don't understand. They think being high is being super stoned and lazy, and they don't understand the full spectrum of application for the plant, including that altered state component, which shouldn't drown out the whole conversation, and it always does, or often does. So yeah, I mean, those are the big detractors that we typically have to deal with. Another thing I'm seeing a lot of questions about today is insurance, especially for hotels, right? Like if they want to include cannabis at a wedding, or if they want to have a cannabis-friendly space, what is the pathway to not just creating that space and incorporating that space for hemp or cannabis, but can it be insured? And what does that mean? So that's been something in the last year or two that I've been seeing more of. Also just the destination development, right? So like making sure that you're getting the information so a destination that wants to be cannabis friendly develops, like for example, Lagunitas Brewery in Sonoma County. They have 30,000 people a year come through there through tourism. And they buy merchandise, they eat food, they walk out, they become walking advertisements with t-shirts that say Lagunitas, and it's part of their business model. Like, at what point does a destination raise their hand and say, hey, we want one of the 10 manufacturing licenses here to have a strong tourism component and be located in the right location to serve that part of our destination experience economy? So there's not a whole lot of destinations I see thinking in that way. And so that's another, I don't know if that's a barrier to overcome. I think that is, but I think that's that next step of like, how do we really start looking at intelligent and strategic destination development that can serve our residents as well as our visitors in the safest, most informed way that drives community vitality and attracts visitors at the same time. And so you're really building an asset with intention based on data and opportunity. But it always, I mean, typically people are scared with stigma, smoking, and the altered state are the typical three detractors.
Councilmember Leslie Fries has a follow-up. Councilmember?
Yeah, especially in regards to policy and seeing that tourism around this plant is really heavily focused on health and wellness. How do you think the phenomenon of THCA being sold as hemp and all these synthetic cannabinoids being sold as hemp affects that?
Yeah. So you're talking about the wellness. Repeat the front end of that question related
Yeah,
to THCA?
I mean, I've just been really unsatisfied with seeing what I came into the industry definitely on the health and wellness hemp side of stuff, and seeing, the hemp cannabinoid industry just really go south, in my opinion, and all the psychoactive synthetic cannabinoids being sold as hemp, and now, high THC marijuana being, defined as THCA hemp, and how that's just kind of altered the landscape. And it's really taken a different direction than health and wellness, especially with, the synthetic cannabinoids and not the transparency around THCA. And now, trying to apply to policy, trying to create policy, and, how does all that affect it?
Oh my God. Yeah, what a big problem, right? It's like, and again, I know what I know. I'm definitely, more adverse. I'm adverse to single, like, synthetic cannabinoids is not my speed as well. I very much look at this as an agricultural crop in the ground, grown by a human kind of product with daily watering. So it's I think it's really complicated. That I think there was a lot of missteps or very strategic steps, one or the other, early on by creating two separate industries around the same plant. And that really, from go, set this up for being an absolute mess. And I do want to say that, acknowledging that, looking at both industries as two different chessboards of how do we normalize this and get this plant into people's hands with knowledge in a safe way. At the end of the day, I think that's the big goal of all of us, right? Is to get the plant can work. We just have to get it out into the world because it has the intelligence to do its thing, whether it's hemp packaging or whether it's, a pre-roll that's some of the best weed in the world, right? It's a really incredible, it operates in a really incredible way. So I think looking at the landscape today and constantly acknowledging what is and how do we proceed from here is a really healthy place to live and really be effective in kind of where we head. When it comes to THCA, it's interesting you asked that, because that was a really important part when I created the State Fair Cannabis Awards and exhibit. I spoke with experts like Etienne, specifically too from the awards side with Johnny Casali and Kevin Jodry, and then worked closely with Alec Dixon at SC Labs to kind of develop this. And I always saw the Emerald Cup as really having a lot of the entheogenic parts down, right? But they weren't really digging deep on the plant in the ground. So that THCA award was like a really important thing, because that cannabinoid acids and THCA is different than activated THC. And that whole body of knowledge needs to be represented in mainstream as well. So people know that you could take a TCA rich tincture and not have the psychoactive effects and be able to have this incredible medicinal application. So, yeah, but I think when all the things that you mentioned too, Leslie, is, I mean, I hate to say it, but I also feel like it's just an expression of the poor state of our culture, I'm afraid to say. Like, people that are, for whatever reason, scrambling, moving quickly, greedy, more is better. It's this, what is the value and what's the purpose here in this industry and why? And a lot of those, that's why policy does need to catch up, and it needs to create these guardrails for safety for consumers. And I hope that it turns out well. I don't know if I could say beyond that, because it really depends on who's leading at the top, and we need experts that operate with ethics and values to be guiding this as much as possible. And I would say today, I feel like we need more of them than less of them. I think that we're underrepresented. If I'm humble enough to include myself in that, I feel like we don't have a loud enough influence right now on how this is rolling out. And there needs to be more representation from people who, when they operate and when they work, they think of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. They think of community vitality. They think of a healthy world. They think of balance. And we need more influential minds guiding this very powerful industry and plant with those values as much as possible, at the highest levels. And I don't know if that answered your question, but I hope that's all I can really say to it. So,
Leslie, did you have a follow-up to your follow-up?
I was just going to say something about how important transparency, I think, is to keep the consumer and keep their trust. And I've just seen that kind of on the hemp side go away. But yes, all to the ethics, morality, and business, sustainability. Thank you.
And this next question is up my alley, because I was an ambassador for. I hope it's continuing this year. I haven't heard anything regarding 2025 yet, but Tony Landry has our next question.
Thank you, ATN. Yeah, my question is, what lessons, for Brian, what lessons did you learn from launching the California State Fair Cannabis Awards and exhibit? And how did you see cannabis representation in public events evolving?
Yeah. I mean, well, one is I learned that was the first time that I had reached out to my whole network, all the people I respected, to come together to make it happen. And Etienne was one of my first calls, was, I need your help on this. I need your guidance on this. Along with Johnny and Jodry and Janine Coleman and several others that are integral. We also had John Entwistle there speaking on the stage the first year, who was one of the main architects behind Prop 215, as Dennis Peron's husband. I mean, I brought in Wendy Reed, who's a well-respected holistic healer in the Emerald Triangle, who's one of my dear friends. When I called my community, everyone showed up. I mean, and it was amazing how everybody came together in year one and helped me build it and get it off the ground the first 2 years. I'm no longer involved with it, but I'm really proud of that work. It took about 5 years to build and launch. And I'll tell you what else I learned is I was, one reason I led this was I had, aside from the travel work, as I had curated a few museum exhibits for the Sonoma County Museum, as well as a museum in Mendocino County called the Kelly House. So, being able to tell that story of the history of California and the way that cannabis and hemp has influenced and been part of the California story as a destination was really important. And I created all the content pretty much. We had some great content partners with Kenigma, SC Labs, of course. Oaksterdam came in, they gave us content. It was really important to me to have those plants. The first thing that you see when you walk in was having the live plants on site. That was a mandatory thing that I wanted to make happen. Fiddler's Green, one of my good friends, came, brought their plants. We had 5 of them. As soon as people walked in, they were able to connect. Also, I was tasked with creating a strategy that could live inside of a state fair and also could live next door to the candy store for the kids, right? And with the Ferris wheels and mainstream media. So being able to create an exhibit that was an immersive exhibit, honestly, no information was really original, right? Maybe my passion to bring it together was great. And I am a little bit of a nerd when it comes to being a historian, and I can tell stories. But that exhibit is Dennis, Pebbles Trippett, Wendy Reed, ATN, Johnny, Kevin, all these people coming through me to package it up. And that's what I did. I worked with an event producer to help put it together, but conceptualizing the flow, the layout, the content, the story, what does the goals look like? It was also really important for me to have some kind of consumption on site. And that very first year, we were able to have hemp CBD slushies, and we featured the terpene profiles of the award-winning strains in the slushie, so you could taste the terpenes with the hemp. So I was really proud of that idea of having the slushy component with hemp CBD and being able to educate in an experiential way about terpenes and why these people won awards based on whatever category or division they were a part of. So and also we showed short films. I don't know if I went through a whole stretch. I have about 50 hours of interviews with pioneers like Eddie Lepp. I have one of Dennis Peron's last interviews that he tells a story, and putting these films up on the screen so people could see the pioneers. It was really important to me to have Dennis and others, Brownie Mary, have their names spoken and to have them present at this and part of this. So I'm really proud of the work I did with that state fair. So those were all considerations. One of the biggest wins was that mainstream media really latched on. I mean, we had over $20 million of earned media globally. It was picked up by the New York Times, by NPR, mainstream television, late night TV. I mean, and when I look back at my career, that was a significant thing that I'm really proud of, because I felt like it really moved the needle for normalization. I also spent a lot of time mapping out the growth strategy that going to other fairs, and had phone calls with, San Diego and several other places, other states, and was really priming the pump for growth on because that first foundational building, that first model is the hardest lift. And then it gets easier every year. And then, so again, I have no relation or part of it anymore. But as far as what I've built, I think it's going to serve as a vehicle to drive forward normalization. And I still see the community I brought together showing up for it, which is amazing. I know it's in mostly good hands. So that I'm really proud of. And I think that it's going to, hopefully it continues to scale. And I also hope that it makes a lot of room for people that are not comfortable around smoking, if I can say that. I think that you need to have spaces where people don't have to be around smoke, because that is a detractor for a lot of people. And I was a little disappointed this year when I thought that the smoking, my original strategy was to have that next year be non-smoking for 1 year, just one, to be part of the story. So people felt really safe coming in, and you remove that barrier. That didn't happen last year, and that's okay. But going forward, I hope that that gets reconsidered a little bit, because at the end of the day, for me, it's about getting the plant into people's hands in a way that they're comfortable with, that they can relate to. And if that means as an industry, we make space for that kind of consumer, I think it's really important. I think we have a responsibility to do that, actually. That we have a responsibility to make that happen. So those were the big learnings. Earned media is amazing. They're open to it as long as you do it with integrity. I think the last learning that's really important is be really careful about who you get into business with. Surround yourself around like-minded people that their definition and how they relate to work and their job and their impact with their life through their work is somewhat on the same planet as yours. So you can build something and grow together with radical transparency, Leslie, to your point. And, that was a big learning for me. And as this space grows, that even gets more important, of surrounding yourself around like-minded people. That really is a space where you can do good work in a trusted, because when that trust gets fractured, it really is debilitating to any, in a lot of ways. So yeah, that was another, I think, learning, was like, just make sure that you're surrounding yourself around people that you can create a really meaningful and beautiful life with, and you have a similar definition of what that means.
And it's also, inspiring, hopefully, other states to come online and to have those competitions, whereas the cannabis competition was elevated to a state level, whereas everything is usually done by counties. And that is inspiring some counties to come on board and start to go in that direction. Unfortunately, it hasn't changed everything large scale. I would like to echo the concerns of the on-site consumption being a turnoff to people specifically. And we need to make space for all. I'm as hardcore a cannabis person and as an activist as it is. But we need to, I agree, it is our responsibility to set the stage for people. It's one thing to have a private event or something like what was done with the ceremonies, done in a private tent, separate away from everything. So, it was by invitation only. However, the corporatization is a concern as well, because it should be left open to the states and the consumers, and locking one particular company in, I think, is disingenuous, and should also open up for people to compete also as well, to vie for those types of, and be transparent as well. I think would be very helpful, because having been involved in both the Emerald Cup and the California State Fair, there's, an opening to an amalgam of both, because you started initially, there was no judging in the sense of the science. The laboratories were going to be the initial judge, jury, and executioner, which I think is helpful to a certain result, because as we know, cannabis is completely subjective, right? So depending on your judges and what they like, it can go, a certain way in decision, whereas the science was blind. But as there's also limitations to, I think, just using science. I thought there was an interesting mix where there's a new rating system called the Buddhist, which was involved. I would like to learn more about that. But you're also a ganjier, correct? So you are very learned in the ways of cannabis as well.
Yeah, and also I studied under Wendy Reed I'm a certified cannabis therapy consultant. So that was my first course.
Right on. Well, I cannot thank you. Of course, I am with Berkeley Patients Group, and of course, Berkeley Patients Group is on the Cannabis Trail. And of course, the Cannabis Trail is one of your creations, which is helping consumers understand the history that has come about just in California alone. So has the California Cannabis Trail inspired other states to follow suit, or is that just a California thing at this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's right now it's a California thing, specifically Northern California thing, but we are looking at growth around the cannabis trail. Yeah. So the cannabis trail right now is a 9-county trail that travels from Santa Cruz to Trinity County. And there's about 25 cultural landmarks, each of which tells an important cultural story of how cannabis and hemp have been part of California's history and culture. So it's a cultural trail. We definitely acknowledge the global history of cannabis and culture. So the ability to have pop-up 90-day mini cannabis trails in different countries, different places, different states, or have specific landmarks be awarded. I'm actually, the Bulldog is someone I'm talking with Berlin about what does it look like to acknowledge the first lounge in Amsterdam, and is there a program to extend these landmarks to other parts of the world where it justifies having a landmark and being part of the cannabis trail story. Part of the goal this year is we are finishing the trail in Northern California. We're installing 4 more landmarks, one in Santa Cruz dedicated to the work of Wham and Valerie Corral, 2 in Trinity, 1 in Weaverville and 1 in Hayfork. And then one more in Southern Humboldt at Whitethorn Valley that honors Bob McKee and his role in the story of cannabis and the story of the Back to the Land movement, quite frankly, as well as the Beatnik era, where he had a place in all of that. So yeah, we're going to finish building the trail, and we're going to look into how to steadily kind of grow it from here, as well as market it, get it out there as a marketing and a storytelling platform for culture, where now when people visit California, they don't just go on the Marin Cheese Trail. They don't just go on the Napa Wine Road. They also make time to travel the cannabis trail and learn about, why it matters.
And it does. And for Berkeley Patients Group, one of the oldest in the country, is help people understand, and people now understand, because otherwise they don't understand that there was just a handful of us originally, and that now with over 10,000 dispensaries, there's whole generations growing up not understanding the history. So I just want to say, as one who's on the trail, we appreciate that, and it helps bring people in, as well as help us discuss and keep the history and our part in that history alive. So I can't thank you enough for that. So thank you, Brian Applegarth, for coming out tonight and sharing time with our council members. I would like to thank council members Leslie Fries, Michael Green, Michael Crowitz, Michael Davis, Wade Laughter, Tony Landry, and I'm Etienne Fontan. I've been your guide through this journey through cannabis tourism. And we can't thank you enough. And come back and check up with us in the coming years. Let us know how things are going as cannabis continues to expand, and tourism. I know there's bud and breakfast now, and there's all kinds of opportunities that are opening up for people to play host, as well as bud and breakfast. Now you can actually arrive and there's buds on your dresser waiting for you from the local garden. There's all kinds of wonderful things that we used to dream about that someday might be possible that now exist. Although I think it's minimum like 3-day stays for the most part, which I wish there were 1-day stay locations more and more, but hopefully in time that will become more and more proliferant. But I can't thank you enough, Brian, for what you do for cannabis tourism and the passion that you have. So thank you very much for all that you do. Do you have anything that you would like to promote or share before we wrap it up for the night?
I think just say thank you. There's a lot of people in this room that I acknowledge you and the work you've done, and it's an honor to be here, and an honor to be working alongside you in some way, moving this thing forward. It truly takes a village with cannabis. There's so many different conversations to be had. So just thank you for being here tonight and for the work you do.
Well, it's an honor to share that space and walk this path with you. And so as you're watching, prepare yourself for more cannabis tourism in the future. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your night. And this has been our V.A.C. Roundtable number 86. All right. Wow. Can't believe that already. Woo!
The Veterans Action Council is a Pace Radio Network content provider.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at Pace Radio.